No one dared answer the Japanese mafia boss, until the black waitress replied in perfect Japanese. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character. The night it happened, the whole restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. Soft jazz drifted through the air, silverware glimmered under golden lights, and the clinking of glasses echoed like distant whispers. Then the doors opened. A man walked in with a presence that froze every conversation. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. A tattoo curling up his neck like a warning. A Japanese mafia boss, followed by two silent men in dark suits. No one dared to greet him. No one dared to speak. He took a seat in the private dining room, the one reserved for people who could buy the building with a single wire transfer, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't in English. His voice sliced through the room in crisp, flawless Japanese, low enough to be polite, cold enough to be terrifying. Servers glanced at each other, helpless. Managers froze. Guests pretended to be invisible. Everyone heard the words. No one understood them. And that silence, that fearful silence, made the air heavier than the expensive chandeliers hanging over their heads. Across the room, Naomi, a young black waitress with calm eyes and a quiet presence, placed her tray down carefully. She wasn't supposed to be near the private room tonight. She wasn't supposed to look at men like him, much less speak to them. She had been invisible all shift long, just another server slipping between tables, offering refills, smiling politely, taking orders. A woman in pearls had snapped her fingers at her earlier. A businessman waved her away mid-sentence. And the assistant manager, Foster, had hissed under his breath, "Stay out of the VIP area. Don't embarrass us." But as the mafia boss repeated his question in Japanese, irritation tightening the edge of his voice, Naomi felt something stirred deep inside her. A memory. Language she carried in her bones. Years ago, she'd lived in Japan as a child. Her father had been stationed there, and she spent her afternoons chasing cicadas, folding paper cranes with her neighbors, and listening to the rhythmic beauty of the language flow around her like music. Japanese wasn't just something she learned. It was something she lived. But nobody at the restaurant knew that. And nobody expected the quiet black waitress to know a word beyond "yes, sir," and "more water." The mafia boss leaned forward, his tone darker now, asking again if anyone in this establishment could understand him. The room tightened like a fist. A server dropped a fork. Another stepped back slowly, shaking his head. One of the bodyguards chuckled under his breath. That was the moment Naomi moved. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a small, steady step forward, then another. Foster saw her and hissed, "Naomi, don't you dare." But she was already walking toward the storm, toward the danger, toward the man no one else dared to face. And when she reached his table, she bowed, not the shallow, awkward bow Americans gave, but a precise, respectful gesture learned years ago. The mafia boss raised an eyebrow, surprised. Then Naomi lifted her head, met his eyes, and replied in perfect, natural, Tokyo-accented Japanese. The room didn't just fall silent. It stopped breathing. And that was the moment the night changed forever. The room was so silent it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Every eye locked on Naomi, the young black waitress standing before the Japanese mafia boss, as if this moment had been waiting for her all her life. The boss's expression shifted, the sharp lines of his jaw softening with curiosity, not anger. Not yet. He spoke again in Japanese, this time slower, testing her. Naomi answered without hesitation, her voice steady, her pronunciation flawless. She matched his tone perfectly, that delicate balance of respect and confidence only someone who truly understood the culture could carry. A ripple went through the room, a small collective gasp from people who had spent the last few minutes pretending they were invisible. Even the two bodyguards exchanged glances, no longer amused. Every person in that restaurant had just realized something they had never considered before. The quiet waitress they ignored knew something powerful, something they did not. Naomi kept her gaze steady, not defiant. Not fearful, just present. It was the kind of presence she learned growing up between two worlds, first as a child in Japan, then as a teenager back in the United States. She remembered walking through narrow Kyoto streets, the sound of cicadas buzzing, her neighbor's grandmother teaching her how to fold paper cranes, and the evenings spent watching Japanese dramas with subtitles she no longer needed. Japanese was not just a skill. It was a part of her story. Still, standing here now, facing a man with the kind of power that came with shadows and secrets, Naomi felt her pulse quicken. The boss leaned back slowly, studying her. Then he asked another question. This one was longer, layered, and more complex, the kind that carried cultural weight. Naomi translated it perfectly. Then, carefully, she explained the nuance, the unspoken meaning underneath. The entire restaurant froze. People who had no idea what was being said suddenly understood from her tone that she was not just translating words. She was translating intent. One of the servers dropped a glass. It shattered against the marble floor, and no one even turned to look. All focus remained on Naomi. Foster, the assistant manager, hovered behind her, sweating through his collar. He wanted to pull her away, but he also understood that touching her now might be the worst possible move. The Mafia boss finally smiled. Not a wide smile, not a friendly smile, but a real one. A slow, deliberate acknowledgement. He spoke again, this time in flawless English, surprising the entire room. What is your name? Naomi blinked. She had expected another test in Japanese, not this. Naomi Carter, sir. He nodded once. Naomi Carter. He repeated as if weighing each syllable. Tell your manager that I want only you to serve my table tonight. Foster's throat clicked as he swallowed. Sir, with respect, she is not assigned to the VIP section. The boss turned his head slowly, so slowly it felt like gravity itself shifted. I was not asking. Foster's face drained of color. He stepped back immediately. Naomi did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply bowed again, a gesture of respect that made the boss's eyes soften once more. She brought water to the table, placed it gently, her movements quiet and precise. As she turned to leave, the boss asked her something else. This time in Japanese again. Naomi paused, processing his words. They were not a question. They were a statement. A heavy one. You lived in my country once, he said. I can hear it in your voice. Naomi nodded. Yes, sir. For several years. He tapped his finger on the table. Then you know our saying. A person's true nature is revealed in silence. Naomi understood exactly what he meant. The room had been full of silence tonight. But hers was different. He continued, his tone low. People fear me. They obey me. But you walked forward when everyone else stepped back. Naomi steadied her breathing. I did what felt right, sir. The boss nodded slowly. That is why I will ask you something no one else here can answer. The air tightened again, thick with tension. Naomi felt every heartbeat like a drum. The boss leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. Tell me, he said, which one of the men in this room lied to me? Naomi's breath caught, because she already knew who it was, and she realized this night was far from over. Naomi felt the weight of the Mafia boss's question settle over her like a thick fog, heavy and suffocating. Which one of the men in this room lied to him? She had heard it, tucked inside his earlier Japanese phrasing, something subtle that most non-native speakers would have missed entirely. It was a detail about a shipment date and a promise made in honorific form, a phrase that should have only been used by someone directly involved with the negotiation. One man had responded incorrectly, repeating a term that was used exclusively in internal conversations, not public ones. Naomi glanced across the room, her breath steady, her mind running through the sequence like a chess player retracing moves. The man was still standing near the far wall, trying very hard to appear small, hoping the shadows would swallow him. A tall man in a gray suit, the kind of man who talked too much at the bar and too little when it mattered. He avoided eye contact the moment Naomi's eyes moved toward him. The Mafia boss noticed. He always noticed. Do not answer yet, he said quietly in Japanese, his eyes following her gaze like a predator tracking movement. Think carefully. Naomi already had. She knew exactly who it was. She also knew the room was becoming dangerous. The air felt charged, alive, like a storm waiting to strike. The boss leaned back, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the table, not impatient, but calculating. He spoke softly, the kind of softness that made the people closest to him tremble. "There is a reason I asked you," he said. "Not because you speak my language, but because you hear what others do not." Naomi swallowed, her chest rising and falling with a measured breath. She had spent her life hearing things others missed. Microtones, pauses, the shift in someone's voice when they wanted to hide something. She had learned those skills out of survival. Growing up between two cultures meant listening was a form of translation, and translation was a form of survival. The boss continued, this time in English. "Look at the men in this room, Naomi Carter, and tell me what you see." She looked, not just glanced, but truly looked, at the restless shuffling of feet, at the man in the gray suit gripping his glass too tightly, at Foster hovering near the doorway pretending everything was normal, at guests trying desperately to appear uninvolved, and at the quiet fear sitting in the corners like guests no one invited. Naomi lowered her voice. "I see someone who spoke when he should have stayed silent." The boss leaned forward slightly. "Who?" Naomi hesitated. It was not fear of the Mafia boss that made her pause. It was fear of telling the truth in front of people who already underestimated her. She had spent too many shifts being treated like she did not belong, like she was decoration, like she was furniture dressed in a uniform. Now she held the spotlight, and with it, the risk. "You know already," she said gently. "You just wanted to see if I would say it." The boss smirked. "Correct." He looked toward the man in the gray suit, who stiffened as if struck. "Bring him here," the boss said. His bodyguards moved instantly. The man's face drained of color as he was escorted forward. The entire restaurant watched, the silence thick enough to chew. The man stammered, "Sir, there must be some mistake." "I did not." "Stop," the boss said, holding up one hand. His gaze slid back to Naomi. "Now, tell him what he said wrong." Naomi inhaled, drawing on. Her memory. "When you asked about the shipment delay, you used a form of honorific speech meant for internal partners only." He responded with the phrase, "Watashitachi no mondai wa nai," which means, "We have no issue." She paused. "But no one outside your organization should have known the phrase you used." The man's mouth opened and closed like he was gasping for air. The boss tilted his head. So he admitted knowledge he should not have had. Naomi nodded. "Yes, sir." The boss looked at the man in the gray suit with a calmness that was far more frightening than anger. "And you thought I would not notice." The man trembled. "Please, I can explain." "You already explained more than enough," the boss said. Then he turned back to Naomi, his face unreadable. "You have saved me from a traitor tonight." Naomi felt a chill run through her. She had not expected that word. Traitor. Not in a restaurant filled with tourists and wealthy diners sipping wine as if the world outside did not exist. The boss rose from his seat. "Naomi Carter," he said, his voice steady and surprisingly warm. "You have given me something more valuable than the truth. You have given me clarity." Naomi held his gaze, her posture steady. "I only told you what I heard. And that," he replied, "is what most people cannot do." The room watched as he bowed his head to her, a gesture of respect so shocking that several guests gasped out loud. Naomi's heart pounded. The night had started with fear, but now it was shifting into something else entirely. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The restaurant felt like a stage holding its final breath as the Japanese Mafia boss bowed his head to Naomi, a gesture so unexpected that even the chandeliers seemed to flicker in disbelief. No one moved. No one whispered. It was as if the entire room had been rewritten in a single moment. Naomi stood there, steady, her heartbeat loud in her ears, but her face calm. She had grown used to being underestimated, dismissed, ignored, spoken over, but never in her life had someone with this kind of power looked at her with respect that felt almost ceremonial. The man in the gray suit, now exposed as the liar, slumped toward the floor, pleading quietly. The bodyguards held him firmly, but did not look at him. Their eyes remained fixed on the boss, waiting for instruction. The boss waved them off with a flick of his hand. "Remove him from my sight," he said calmly. His voice was not raised, but the authority inside it echoed through the room like a closing door. The man was escorted out, his footsteps uneven, his breath breaking into tiny gasps. When the door shut behind him, the silence he left behind felt like a vacuum pulling the air from everyone's lungs. The boss turned back to Naomi. "You have a rare skill," he said. "A gift of listening between words." Naomi dipped her head slightly. My grandmother used to say paying attention is how you survive a world that talks too loudly. The boss smiled for the first time, genuine and warm, though still edged with danger. Your grandmother was a wise woman. Foster, the assistant manager, lingered at a distance, shifting uncomfortably. His face looked tight, like he was waiting for a blow he knew he deserved. He cleared his throat. Sir, perhaps we should resume service. We do not want to disrupt. You have already disrupted enough, the boss interrupted, his voice slicing the air. Foster froze. The boss continued. This young woman is the only reason you are not facing the consequences of your own incompetence. Show her respect. Foster's mouth twitched, the humiliation crawling up his neck like a rash. He nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. The boss refocused on Naomi. Take a seat, he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Naomi blinked. Sir, I am still on shift. I am aware, he replied gently. But I am asking you as a guest, not as an employee. The room erupted with silent shock. A waitress being invited to sit with a mafia boss was unthinkable, unbelievable, something pulled from the pages of a story no one would dare to tell out loud. Naomi hesitated only a moment before she sat. She did so gracefully, not timid, not bold, but balanced. The boss nodded in approval. Good, he said. Now tell me something. When you heard the lie earlier, what made you so certain? Naomi folded her hands in her lap. The way he answered your question did not match the honorific form you used. It sounded like he had been part of conversations he should not have been part of. And you trusted your judgment. I had to, Naomi said. I could hear the truth inside the way he spoke. The boss let out a breath through his nose, thoughtful. Most people do not trust their instincts. They fear being wrong more than they fear the truth. Naomi looked around the room at the frozen faces, the stiff shoulders, the guests pretending to eat salads that had long gone warm. Most people do not have the luxury of speaking up, she said. Most people do not have someone who will listen. The boss's eyes softened, the darkness inside them shifting like a tide. And when you were a child in Japan, did people listen to you then? Naomi paused. The memory brushed her like a breeze. Yes, she said quietly. Because there, I was not judged before I opened my mouth. The boss nodded slowly, understanding more than she expected. In my country, we believe the voice reveals the heart. Tonight, your voice revealed courage. Naomi felt heat rise to her cheeks, not embarrassment, but something deeper. Recognition. She had spent her life trying to be heard, not by shouting, but by being precise, careful, attentive. And now those same qualities had brought her into a moment that felt life-changing. The boss leaned forward slightly. Naomi Carter, he said, I would like to make you an offer. The room sharpened like a held breath. Naomi steadied herself. What kind of offer? The boss smiled faintly, but the power behind it was unmistakable. The kind that could change the course of your entire life. Naomi felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. She had no idea what he was about to ask, but she knew this night was about to turn again, and nothing in her life would ever be the same. Naomi felt the weight of the mafia boss's words settle across the table like a heavy velvet cloth, soft in sound but dense in meaning. An offer. A life-changing offer. Those were not words men like him used lightly. The restaurant had returned to motion around them, but in a strange, fragile way, like people were forcing themselves to act normal without remembering how. Glasses clinked too softly, forks scraped plates with nervous hesitance, and conversations rose and fell like whispers afraid of their own echoes. Naomi stayed perfectly still, her hands resting in her lap, her breath controlled. She had seen enough of life to know that when someone powerful said they had an offer, it could be salvation or a trap. The boss leaned back, studying her with an attention that felt unsettlingly precise. His eyes, dark and sharp, carried a calm that suggested he was used to being patient when others panicked. Do not be afraid, he said gently. I mean no harm. Naomi nodded once, cautiously. What kind of offer are you talking about, sir? The boss tapped his finger against his glass, as if choosing his next sentence with intention. Tell me, Naomi Carter, why are you working here? The question landed harder than she expected. She blinked. Because I need the job, she said. I need the paycheck. That is not what I asked, he said quietly. Naomi swallowed. She knew what he meant. This was not a job that matched her mind. It was not a job meant for someone who heard things others missed, who translated not just language, but intention. But life did not ask her what she wanted. It handed her bills. It handed her responsibility. It handed her the need to survive. She straightened her shoulders. I work here because I had to choose stability over ambition, she said. The boss nodded slowly. And what was your ambition? Naomi hesitated. So few people had ever asked her that question with genuine interest. I wanted to become a translator, she said softly. I wanted to work with languages, maybe even teach someday. He raised an eyebrow. And what stopped you? Naomi smiled sadly. Life, she said. Life stopped me. The boss exhaled, almost empathetically. Then allow me to give some of that life back. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. Sir, I do not understand. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. You have a gift, he said. A rare one. In my world, people pretend to hear, pretend to listen, pretend to understand. But you do not pretend. You perceive. Naomi felt warmth rise in her chest. Not pride, but a recognition she had never been offered before. The boss continued. I want you to work for me. Naomi inhaled sharply. Work for you. As an interpreter, he said. As an advisor. Someone who can tell me what people are too afraid or too foolish to say out loud. Naomi shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. Sir, I am just a waitress. No, he said firmly. You are not. His voice softened. A waitress does not expose a traitor with a single sentence. A waitress does not carry two cultures in her voice. A waitress does not sit across from me with this level of calm. He waited a moment before adding. But a woman of intelligence does. The words hit her with a force she did not expect, and she looked down briefly, steadying her breath. No one had called her a woman of intelligence in years. Not since Japan. Not since her father was alive. When she looked up, the boss was still watching her with unwavering attention. You are offering me a job, she said. At your side. Yes, he replied. Full salary. Full respect. Full protection. The last word made her chest tighten. Protection. From what? Or from whom? The boss noticed her shift. Do not misunderstand, he said gently. I am not asking you to become part of anything illegal. I am asking you to become part of something honorable. Something necessary. Naomi took a slow breath. And what would I need to do? The boss smiled faintly. You would need to listen, he said. And tell me the truth. Naomi looked down at her hands. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to leap forward. But the truth was heavier. Sir, she whispered. I do not know if I am the kind of person who can step into a life like that. The boss shook his head. You already stepped into it tonight. Naomi froze. Because he was right. He continued. The question is not whether you can. The question is whether you will. Naomi felt something shift inside her, something deep, something old. A feeling she had buried under years of being overlooked. A feeling that whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was meant for more than what this restaurant had allowed her to be. She lifted her head slowly. The boss waited. The entire room seemed to wait with him. And for the first time in a very long time, Naomi felt the edge of a new future pressing against her hands, waiting to be chosen. Naomi felt the restaurant closing in around her as the Mafia boss's offer lingered between them like a living thing, pulsing with possibility and danger. A job at his side, protection, respect, purpose, all wrapped in a single sentence. It sounded impossible, unreal, like a doorway that should never have opened for someone like her. But it had. And now every heartbeat felt like a countdown. The boss watched her carefully, not with impatience, but with a kind of patience that felt heavier than pressure. He was a man accustomed to waiting for crucial decisions, accustomed to reading the tremble behind a breath or the shift behind a glance. Naomi knew he was evaluating her silently, measuring not her words, but her courage. I do not want your answer yet, he said quietly. I want your truth. Naomi tried to breathe steadily. My truth is that I do not fit into the world you live in, sir, she said. I am not built for shadows or secrets. He tilted his head. You think my world is darkness. But not everything in my world is criminal. Power can be used for protection. Influence can be used for justice. And loyalty, he added gently, can be used for redemption. Naomi felt something twist inside her. Redemption. That word had followed her for years. She thought of her father, the man who taught her her first Japanese greetings, who taught her to listen before speaking. She thought of how she returned to the United States with grief in her suitcase and dreams she could not afford to carry. She thought of working double shifts, ignoring insults that stung, swallowing frustration simply to survive one more day. And she thought of tonight, the moment her voice cut through the silence and changed everything. The boss continued, "Let me ask you something. Have you ever been respected for your intelligence before tonight?" Naomi's eyes softened. "Not often." "Then why would you return to a life that refuses to see you?" Naomi looked down, her fingers curling slightly. "Because it is safer," she whispered. The boss shook his head. "Safe is not the same as alive." The words slid into her like a truth she had been avoiding. Before she could respond, the door to the kitchen slammed open and Foster hurried toward the table, trembling slightly. His tie was crooked, and his smile was stretched too thin. "Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation developing outside." The boss turned slowly. "What kind of situation?" Foster swallowed. "A group of men in black coats arrived. They asked for you directly. They refused to wait in the lobby. They said they need to speak with you immediately." The boss's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "How many?" he asked. "4," Foster said. "Maybe 5. Naomi felt the shift instantly, a tension that moved through the room like electricity. The boss breathed in slowly, then exhaled. "They are not here for conversation," he said. Foster's voice cracked. "Should I call security?" "No," the boss said. "Security will not stop them. They are from a rival group." Naomi's pulse quickened. "Are you in danger, sir?" "Not yet," he said. "But they are here to test me, and they are not subtle in their methods." Naomi felt her stomach tighten. A confrontation here, in a restaurant filled with guests, could erupt into chaos. The boss took a slow sip of water, his calm unervingly steady. "Naomi," he said, "there is a reason I made my offer tonight. My world is changing. There are shifts happening that require people who can see what others cannot." Naomi felt her throat tighten. "And you think I can help with that?" "I know you can," he said. "Because you saw the traitor before I did." The doors to the restaurant suddenly opened, and the men Foster described stepped in. All in black coats. All stone-faced. All scanning the room with predatory precision. Servers froze. Guests turned stiff. The air went razor-sharp. The boss did not look at the men. He looked at Naomi. "Tell me one thing," he said calmly. "If a storm walks into your life, do you run from it or walk toward it?" Naomi felt her heart pound against her ribs. The men in black stepped closer, their footsteps echoing like steady drumbeats. And in that moment, she realized the answer would decide her future. The boss waited, silent and patient, as if he already knew what she would choose. And Naomi, feeling every shard of fear and courage collide inside her, understood that this choice was not about danger at all. It was about who she was becoming. The moment the men in black coats stepped into the restaurant, the entire room seemed to fold into itself. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks hovered in midair, and every breath felt stolen. Naomi felt her pulse in her fingertips, in her throat, in her spine, but she did not look away. The boss remained completely still, a calm center in a storm that had only just begun to form. One of the men, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that looked carved from stone, scanned the room and locked onto the boss's table. "We need to speak with you," he said, his English sharp, clipped, and cold. Foster shrank back, nearly stumbling as he tried to appear invisible. Naomi noticed how he trembled, and for the first time, she realized he understood exactly how dangerous this moment was. The boss lifted his gaze slowly. "You are interrupting my meal," he said calmly, as if correcting a rude customer and not a group of men capable of starting a war. The tall man smirked. "This will not take long." The boss's fingers tapped the table exactly once. A small signal Naomi recognized meant he was thinking. Then he stood. Every muscle in the room tightened as he rose, but he did not show a hint of fear. "Naomi," he said without taking his eyes off the men, "stand beside me." She froze for half a heartbeat. Stand beside him, in front of dangerous men, in a moment that could erupt into violence. Her body reacted before her mind had fully processed the command. She stepped to his side, and the tallest man's eyes flicked to her instantly. "Who is she?" he demanded. The boss answered in Japanese, his tone low and deliberate. Naomi understood every word, but the rest of the room did not. and the confusion only multiplied the tension. The tall man narrowed his eyes. Do not play games. Speak a language we all understand. Naomi stepped forward half a pace, her voice steady despite the tremble at the edge of her breath. He said, I am someone who sees what others miss, she translated. The tall man shifted, sizing her up with a new kind of scrutiny. A waitress? He asked. Naomi held his stare. A listener, she replied. The boss's eyes softened with approval. One of the other men stepped closer. We have information that concerns you, he said to the boss. Your organization is under review. There are rumors of betrayal, movements you did not authorize. The boss did not flinch. And you chose this restaurant, filled with witnesses, to deliver this news? The man shrugged. You chose the stage. We only walked onto it. Naomi noticed the slightest movement in the corner of her vision. A server, carrying a tray, shaking so hard that the glasses rattled. Behind him, a group of guests began quietly slipping toward the exits. The room was seconds from unraveling. The boss leaned slightly toward Naomi and spoke softly in Japanese, trusting her again. What do you hear? She listened, not to words, but to tones, to breaths, to the rhythm beneath the tension. She focused on the tall man's voice, his pauses, the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against his coat. He is not here to attack, she whispered back in Japanese. He is here to intimidate. Something scared him before he arrived. The boss's eyes sharpened. Naomi translated her observation aloud for the room to hear. The tall man stiffened. You know nothing about us. Naomi stepped forward again. But I know fear when I hear it. The silence that followed was heavy enough to collapse the ceiling. The tall man reacted first, his jaw tightening, but not with anger. With realization. She had struck a nerve. The boss spoke gently, almost kindly. If you came with news, give it. If you came with threats, deliver them. But do not confuse intimidation with strength. The men exchanged glances. Finally, the tall man exhaled. There will be a meeting, he said. Tonight. Midnight. You are expected. The boss nodded once. Then I will be there. Without another word, the men turned and walked out, the heavy restaurant doors closing behind them like the ending of a chapter. When the room finally released its breath, Naomi realized her hands were trembling slightly. The boss looked at her, steady and calm. You protected me again, he said quietly. Not with force. With insight. Naomi inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had just happened. She had stepped toward the storm. And she was still standing. The night felt different after the Mafia men left, the air charged with the kind of energy only a storm could bring. Naomi stood by the table, the heavy silence of the restaurant wrapping around her like a blanket. She could hear the soft murmurs of the guests, their voices rising back into the air, though no one dared make eye contact with her or the boss. Every eye was on the door, still expecting the men to return, still expecting the tension to snap. But for Naomi, there was no turning back now. She had made her choice. The boss remained seated, unmoving, his expression unreadable. His hands rested on the table, his fingers tapping lightly, almost as if he was waiting for something, someone. Naomi cleared her throat softly, breaking the stillness. What happens now? She asked, the question that had been lingering in her mind for the last hour. The boss finally looked at her, his eyes steady but with an edge of something deeper, an understanding. Now, he said, his voice low, we prepare. Naomi felt a chill at the word. Prepare for what? He stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. For the meeting tonight. Midnight. It will not be just a negotiation. It will be a test. A test of loyalty. A test of who will stand beside me when the storm hits. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. A test. Naomi had always been tested. Every day of her life had been a test of survival, of grit, of playing the game without ever truly knowing the rules. But this was different. This was a game where the stakes were life or death. The boss walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the dim light outside. They will come for me, he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. And they will come for anyone standing by my side. Naomi swallowed hard. And if I stand with you? Then you stand for something more than yourself, he replied, turning to face her. You stand for a future. Naomi felt the weight of his words press against her chest. She thought about her life, about the choices that had brought her here, working double shifts in a restaurant, brushing off insults, ignoring the dreams she had set aside for survival. But in this moment, standing next to a man like him, a man who saw her not just for what she was, but for what she could become, Naomi knew this was the moment where her future could finally be rewritten. The boss smiled faintly. "We will go into that meeting as equals. You will not be the waitress anymore. You will be my partner." The words echoed in her ears, filling the emptiness that had been growing inside her for so long. Naomi had never imagined she could be more than what life had boxed her into. But standing here, with the weight of everything shifting beneath her feet, she realized that she had always been meant for more. She was not just the girl who served drinks, who smiled and nodded. She was Naomi Carter, and now she had a chance to rewrite her story. "I will stand with you," she said, her voice steady, her resolve clear. The boss nodded, his expression approving. "Good. Because tomorrow, everything changes." Naomi didn't need to ask what he meant. She already knew. Tomorrow, the storm would come. And whether she would survive it or not, she was already a part of it. The night stretched on, the clock ticking toward midnight, the moment that would change everything. Naomi could feel the weight of the decision she had made, settling deeper into her bones with every passing second. The restaurant was closing, the guests long gone, leaving behind only the hum of the dimmed lights and the quiet rhythm of her thoughts. The boss had already prepared everything. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Naomi stood in the kitchen, the final shift behind her, but her mind was far from the dishes she wiped clean. She was thinking about what came next, about the meeting, about the power that would unfold in the next few hours. The door to the back office opened, and the boss stepped inside, his suit sharp as ever, his eyes unreadable. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm. But there was an edge to it that told Naomi this was the point of no return. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I'm ready." They didn't speak again as they walked through the back of the restaurant and into the alley, the cool air biting at her skin. The car was waiting, a sleek black vehicle that seemed to absorb the city's shadows. The boss slid into the passenger seat, and Naomi followed, the door closing behind her with a soft click. The car pulled away from the curb, the city lights flashing by like the past she was leaving behind. She looked over at the boss, who had already turned his attention to the horizon. "This is it, Naomi," he said, his tone firm. "Tonight, we take the first step toward changing everything. You're no longer just a witness. You're a part of the story now." Naomi felt a surge of energy, a rush of excitement she had never allowed herself to feel. The meeting ahead wasn't just a chance to prove her loyalty. It was a chance to take control of her own destiny. The car pulled into a dark building, the door opening to reveal a dimly lit room filled with men, their eyes sharp and calculating. The boss stepped out, and Naomi followed him, walking side by side into the heart of a world she never thought she would be a part of. The storm was here, and Naomi Carter was ready to face it head on.